Hey, thanks for having me to your home, and
Welcome.
thank you for offering to do this.
Sure.
I had fun at your event in Longbow Key. That was awesome, so appreciate
Thanks.
that.
Thanks for the support.
Yeah, a lot of just good conversations there, a lot of good people, and it's always a bonus when people play tennis, right? So
Totally.
go out and
It's a great sport.
yeah.
Sport for life.
I think I must have played what 3 hours, 3.5 hours in the
You
sun.
did.
Yeah,
I think I played it that day. I played probably about 30 minutes, but you were the longest, most endured player on the court that weekend, for that day at
yep. I was, and I was burned too, pretty bad. But
least.
anyway, that's what happens when my wife's not around.
Yeah.
I don't quite take care of myself like I
Keeps you
should.
in check.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I enjoyed having lunch with you the other day, and we were
Sure.
kind of talking back and forth, and the stuff we were talking about, I knew would be fascinating for a lot of people that we work with and people that watch the videos and whatnot.
Sure.
And so I wanted to sit down with you and ask some questions, and I know you have some really good stories, and I think some wisdom to pass along,
Sure.
or maybe you could call it a
Battle scars.
yeah, or moments of clarity, right? It's
Moments of
more like
clarity.
you have moments of clarity where it's like, how did I not see this before? But then you
Sure.
see it moving forward, right?
Yeah.
And then we've all chased all the things in life that the world tells us to chase. And then,
Money, mostly.
yeah, yeah,
There's
exactly.
three of them. I think it's money, power, and fame, right? Those are the big ones.
Yeah. Especially, I'm trying to remember that now with my young boys, is they don't think like I think, right? And they're still in that kind of, they think the results or the outputs of the right direction, they're thinking that's the actual direction, right?
Yeah.
Instead of the fruit that comes from doing the right things
Yeah.
or following your calling, right?
Yeah, immediate gratification.
Yeah. And I remember you had said you talk a lot about every time I've met with you, you've talked about how you're just so relieved and so much happier now because you did the grind, you did that whole thing, so you had that experience, which was good, and then you came out the other side, or maybe you just said it kind of had it and just said, you know what, I'm going to enjoy the rest of my life. I'm going to use my strengths. I'm going to give back. I'm going to, give value to people, give fruit to people, give away.
Yeah.
And so didn't necessarily see that it was, the end all be all. And so you kind of changed mindsets. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth,
Sure.
but can you talk a little bit about that and your experience? I think your story is really good. And I think because you went in that first path, the second path, and maybe after the moment of clarity, was so much more impactful. And I can tell you appreciate what you're doing now. And part of appreciation, I think, is this is where I was, this is where I am now, and I really appreciate it. And maybe just tell that story, if that's right.
Yeah, so it's not two paths. It's I mean, you could say it's two paths, but it's kind of like three paths in that I think you have your childhood, right? And then you kind of have your young adult life, right? And then you have this next phase, which I'm on, which is kind of like the adult kid phase, right? Which is nothing more than
Yeah.
being, who you are and originally were wired to be, right?
Yeah, like that adult thing wasn't that fun. I'm going to go back to the kid thing. Right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And, I think everybody has their own path, right, in life. And mine, really, as I look back on it, centered around my, what I call learning difference, but most people call it dyslexia.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing, how that shaped.
When did it start affecting you? When you were young?
The beautiful thing about the dyslexia is when I was growing up, it went undiagnosed. So, and I started picking it up, not when I was in kindergarten, because I had a ton of enthusiasm for going to school. Like, I was actually, I would go out and grab my kindergarten books, like, before kindergarten even started and start working on, like, the school exams. Like, I was that excited to go to school.
Yeah.
But quickly realized by the time I was in third or fourth grade that I was kind of in the back of the class in terms of performance. I remember I was in a music theory class, and I got my guitar here, but I remember, the teacher came up and we had this music theory class, right, where you had to learn the notes, which I still don't know. Like I can't even read music today, but dyslexia is a language processing, difference. And so I remember like we took this test and it was a theory test, and I remember the next day the teacher came back and said, I have an announcement, and the highest grade in the class was, and he announced my name, and I was like, wow. I was like,
Cool.
got up there, and then quickly realized that I had the lowest grade in the class. So, and all the kids kind of humored me, and that was kind of the beginning. And then I ended up.
So you remember that?
Oh, well, those are the things that really shape your personality.
Yeah.
Like, I ended up becoming a little shy. I think I still am a bit shy, and it left a question mark, right? Because I didn't feel like I was stupid. That's what they said. Like, he's either lazy or stupid, but or doesn't work hard, right? So that's kind of the
that's
patterns.
That's pretty confusing.
But I felt smart, but I just wasn't getting results. And I think by the time I got into fourth grade, they called my parents, and I had an emotional outburst at class, and because I was behind and I wasn't keeping up, and they just decided to put me back, basically. So that was another moment where, like, oh, okay, well, I'm not keeping up with my peers, so that's another, like, groove, like, in the record, you know? So, and that kind of progressed, but I was a good athlete, and then I was also I got attached to a guitar, like, in high school. I just picked up a guitar. A friend played guitar, and so I had those two outlets. And I was actually a very good runner. Like I ran a 4:30, I think, as a freshman, indoors.
Wow.
Yeah, and then which was pretty good back then.
But that's tough because you're excelling at things that aren't necessarily like like the teachers and the parents and the spotlight and stuff.
Yeah, right? and running is kind of a loner's sport. It's just you and the road. But it was an outlet for me, and I had success there. So I had confidence, right, in that sense. I see a lot of kids today that might have a learning difference, and they're lacking confidence because they have the dyslexia, but they don't have, something to give them confidence, so they kind of drift, and they, it's tough, but today they flag it, like they flag your learning difference much earlier.
Yeah, they're more sensitive to it, right? Because before they would just say, what? You're not trying, or you're not, I mean, that's really deflating.
Yeah, and so I went down this path, and I grew up in Rye, New York, which is really one of those super affluent suburbs, right? So like every kid's parent, like their expectations were that they were going to go to the Ivy Leagues, right, and go get a job down in New York or work on Wall Street. Yep. So
no pressure.
So no pressure, and I clearly wasn't on that path, and I got in a band when I was in high school, and I was running, and my hair was long, and I was basically starting to slide out of high school, I was gigging a bit, and just was on a completely different path, and then one day, my guidance counselor said, listen, Rem, your son has no chance of getting into college unless he goes to some like a walk-on, the equivalent of a walk-on, like he's got to walk onto a campus they have these programs, and they're registered with me, so that's an option, right? But my dad.
Did you want to go to college?
At that time, I didn't, but I felt the pressures, right, of conforming.
Oh, yeah.
Like they were all saying, "Hey, Rem, like, you're not really on the path,
right?
Okay." And I said, "Well, I know I'm not on the path. I'm on a different path." And
how did you feel about that? Did that feel good to you, empowering, or did it feel?
Well, I think there was a time at this point where, like, I realized, like, I would be letting my parents down. Like, their expectations were for me to go to college. So, fortunately, my dad said, hey, maybe you should go, or somebody suggested, hey, maybe you send your son to boarding school. It might give him a second chance, right? And I felt very fortunate. At the time, I was like, there's no way I'm going to go to boarding school. But I ended up going to some interviews, and the first couple of schools, it's like, there's no way I'm going here. And then I found another school, Blair Academy, and I met a history professor there named Marty Miller, he was the cross-country coach as well, so we had that in common. And he was just, he looked like Dr. Zhivago, and he was kind of like this liberal, Jewish, agnostic, good, super great guy, and I was just very fortunate to meet him. And I was like, okay, I'll go to Blair. And so I cut the hair and kind of transformed into this boarding school guy. And it was a new chance for me, and so I had to repeat again. So that's repeating twice. I had to repeat.
Did you like that, or no? Did you feel like a new beginning? Or
I felt like a new beginning, and grades were, I was past grades, so it was a new start. It wasn't it wasn't an academic thing, And so, long story short, I went to Blair and found my feet academically, and eventually played lacrosse there, and ended up getting into one college, and that was another experience. Like, everybody's getting the letters, the letters, and all my letters were like, no, because my SATs were pretty not good. My math wasn't bad, but my language processing on English, I mean, it's any foreign language or anything is just tricky.
Oh, yeah.
So, but...
Okay, the SAT's got to be...
Oh,
like near impossible. Yeah.
And that's another thing. Like, I took away, like, anything that has a test attached to it, I'm immediately skeptical of it to this day. So this is another thing that's kind of grown out of my dyslexia, because it kind of boxes you into something. And long story short, I mean, I ended up going to Hartwick College for 2 years, and the boarding school prepped me for it. I got basically straight A's there. And
how did you turn it around academically like that? I mean, did you just find a side door? Did you kind of figure out a way around it, or?
Well, so the side door, it comes in the next academics chapter. Okay. But getting in, I was on probation, and Hartwick was a fairly average school academically, private school up in Oneonta, New York, and when I got up there, I felt like, hey, I didn't get into any colleges. Like, I'm going to prove them wrong. It was like a chip that I had, and I'm going to figure out how to get into a better school. So my mission from day one was, how do I get out of Hartwick, right? And, so
you were kind of driven by the naysayers and telling you couldn't.
Pretty much.
If someone says you can't do it, you don't like it.
Yeah, exactly. And, I had something to prove, because I was, a lot of people that I grew up with pretty much wrote me off, for whatever reason. Like, I had a elementary school teacher that said I'd either go to jail, or what did he say? He goes, Ram, you're either going to end up being like president, or you're going to be in jail. And I'm betting you're going to be in jail, something like that. And he bet me like $20, or I bet him $20.
That's really encouraging.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I mean, this is an elementary school. And I remember coming back, after I got my college degree, and I went and collected that money from this guy, So I ended up surprisingly, UPenn, an Ivy League school, and I was kind of like, I want to go to an Ivy League school, because that would be like a hat trick, Penn had a program. I just kind of wandered out there and interviewed, and it was like their general studies program. It was like a back door into the Ivies. And I ended up kind of humbly interviewing with this woman. It was literally her last day, right? And I was like, hey, I'm spent 2 years here, and I'm in Philadelphia, and I'm looking to, go to Penn. And we had a great interview, and she must have felt something inside me, or she felt sorry for me, but I got the call about 2 weeks later, and so I gained a foot into the school, got admitted into the program, and I realized that I could, through this program, gain access to all the same classes that everybody else would get, who would normally be at that stage in college. So, so I started just signing up for 4 or 5 classes, and